My name is Kathleen Kaiser. Welcome to my typographic voice and visual narrative project. My project is based on the work of Charles Bukowski, and specifically his poem, Let It Unfold You. I selected Bukowski's work because he was a local hero to myself and friends when I lived in San Pedro, where Bukowski spent his final years. Part 1 of the project began with a narrative exploration. I explored the bookmaking of Ed Ruscha, Irma Bloom, and Janice Lowry. I also researched the 1927 Bolt book by Fortunato de Piro. Part 2 called for creating lists and making 4 books from those lists. I selected 3 literary works that I wanted to further explore their meaning: Joni Mitchell's lyrics to Both Sides Now, Leonard Cohen's lyrics for Hallelujah, and Charles Bukowski's poem Let It Unfold You. I selected Bukowski's work. Bukowski's poem takes the reader on a journey through his emotional development. It is a cautionary tale from Bukowski to his reader to be a better person than he was. The poem describes his years filled with rage, then an exhaustion at being angry all the time, to a sort of awakening where he begins to see joy in life, and finally to discovering peace. The poem begins with the phrase, either peace or happiness, let it unfold you. The first book is from the prepositions list, and I used only images. I drew illustrations of Bukowski that represented each emotional transition of the poem: anger, exhaustion, awakening, and peace. The illustrations show emotion through facial expression and color. Since there is no text, rules were used to represent copy. The rules are aggressive and agitated in the beginning of the book and become more relaxed toward the end of the book to coincide with the progression of the illustrations. The pages of the book become larger as Bukowski's ability to control his emotions grows. The second book was created through the adjectives list and typography only. As I mentioned, Bukowski's poem presents a cautionary tale to the reader. This book is meant to be an affirmation or self-help book. The reader can find their negative emotions on the left side of the book and look to the right side for a positive affirmation word. On each page, the typeface and color was selected to match the word's emotion. The book ends with the most aspirational verses of the poem. Book 3 is made from the nouns list without adding any other words. I decided to explore the relationship of Bukowski and his wife Linda. The piece is a sliding tool for measuring Bukowski or the alcoholic's mood. Additional meaning was added to the tool by the shape of the bottle, the yellow panel representing alcohol, and the grainy street image. The sliding yellow panel represents the alcohol consumed and reveals words telling the story of Bukowski's actions. On the other side of the piece, Linda's story is revealed. The more Bukowski drinks, Linda's hope fades and her fears increase. An abstract story was created with the verbs and adverbs list for Book 4. I created a piece that references Bukowski's work at the post office and his process of editing his work with aggressive black pen marks. Bukowski is known for the rough language in his work, and I was inspired by redacted documents. The poem was printed in a typewriter typeface, then I redacted all the verbs and adverbs in the poem with a marker. The removed words were printed separately and trimmed to small game-type pieces. The reader can now create their own story by placing in the verbs and adverbs of their choice. Part 3 asks that I look at the original work from a new point of view. During my research on the other books, I found that there are plenty of critics of Bukowski's work. The new point of view for this book would be from the critic of modern poetry. I decided to recreate Bukowski's poem in the tradition of late 1800 bookmaking. There are many elements in the book added for authenticity: handmade paper, deckled edges, tipped-in images, tissue paper linings, and typography of the period. Bukowski's face is photoshopped onto an English gentleman's portrait. I edited the poem from the point of view of an 1800s literary critic, removing any words or references that would be inappropriate for the times. I then added the rants of Bukowski in red. The red ink represents a conversation between Bukowski and the prudish editor of the late 1800s. Part 4 is context through place. The physical place that is adding context to the piece is a Bukowski-type bar. The poem is printed on a glass filled with alcohol and ice. The end of the poem, the positive, more uplifting part, is printed at the top of the glass. At the bottom of the glass is printed the beginning of the poem, that is the angry, self-hating part of the poem. When the alcoholic begins the drink, they are filled with optimism, just like the poem printed at the top of the glass. As they finish the drink, the optimism is lost and the self-hatred sets in, matching the text printed at the bottom of the glass. The ice cubes in the glass have the words hope, happiness, and peace within them. As the alcoholic drinks, the ice cubes melt along with the hope for happiness and peace. Looking back on the Bukowski projects, I see I have an interest in the space between and the gray areas of life. The interest lies in the space between Bukowski's anger and desire to be a good person, the space between Bukowski's loved ones and his behavior, the space between good and bad. I've also found an acceptance in the gray areas. Is Bukowski a bad person? Sometimes. Was his wife crazy to stay? Probably. I recognize that they were flawed people, just like the rest of us.